let's go ahead and get started. On Mondays and Wednesdays, I basically live in this classroom for half a day. I got 3 classes here. All right, so let's go ahead and the first thing is I am grading your exam 1. Question 1 and 2 are both actually graded. I have not turned these to visible yet, so I can't turn it on to visible at this point. But what you're seeing is only your score for that particular question. If you click on each one, it's only reflecting what you're getting for that particular question. So it's not even close to your final score because 2 more questions need to be graded to begin with. And 2, the way is not set up right. The first one has 11 points, the second one has 8 points. It's just that the points make it easy for me to kind of indicate which part you got right and which part you got wrong, but in the end they will be weighted equally, so all 4 questions will be weighted equally in the end. All right, so that part is being done. It's actually in progress. Question number 1 took me a lot longer to figure out how to grade instead of actually the grading part, because I got all sorts of answers for question 1, and I have to figure out how to assign the points accordingly. Question 2 is a lot easier. It's just okay, this step, this step, this step, this step, and I have to figure out how to do the correction. The interesting part about question number 2 is a lot of people missed the 3rd step. The 3rd step is kind of taking the negation of a value and then reassign it back to the same variable. A lot of people say the result is 0 instead of the negation of the value of the previous expression. But the way I grade it is not based on, from here on all the numbers are wrong and therefore they will all be zeros. I basically look at the previous step and say, okay, based on the values from the previous step, does the next step make any sense? And if it does make sense, I will still give you full credit for the next step. So that means a lot of people miss the 3rd step, but as long as the 4th step is consistent with the 3rd step and also the 1st, those people are still getting full credit for the last step. Are you guys kind of understanding what I'm saying? Sort of? Okay. I think only 1 or 2 people got deducted because the steps do not connect at all. So 1 step does not really follow the previous step, so it's like, how can you get to this particular value based on the previous value? So those people or those particular question answers do not get points. All right, so we have that one out of the way, and we want to talk about file operations, especially with the limited summation homework assignment. It is due on Wednesday, so we still have a little bit of time to work on it. The one thing that I want to talk about is, what if you type something other than a number? Okay, the question is the program getting stuck reading the same thing over and over again because it is just not moving forward, or is it going to move forward, and just say that this is not what I'm expecting? Okay, so we want to find out, what the program is actually doing about it, and how to process it, accordingly. So we'll go ahead and open up a window to do this part. And I can just do it in the temp folder. Yep.
You start recording?
Yes, I am recording. Let me just double check. Yes, it is recording. But thank you for the reminder. I do not mind that at all. Okay, so I'm going to write a program called scanf.cpp just to test this particular feature. Scanf is a part of the standard IO library, so I will include standard io.h and int main void. And in this particular case, I just want to read an integer and move forward after that. Or I can just print something after that too. So I will make this an infinite loop. Okay, by the way, what is the quickest way to make an infinite loop in C++?
Well, you have it always equal to 1. You have the loop always equal to 1.
Okay, that's one way to do it. There's another way to do it. Okay, this way is actually a very seldom way to do it. This is actually an infinite loop. There's no expression to evaluate, but by default, this is actually an infinite loop. Now I'm just gonna do it just to make sure that what I said is not incorrect. Okay, so I will make this program an infinite loop. In other words, it will never get out, and all it wants to do is to keep reading integers. That's all it wants to do. Okay, so I will say while not scanf %d into %x, then I will printf, say give me a number, okay, \n, close parenthesis, and the next line is not going to do anything because it just keeps reading the number, keeps reading more numbers. But just to give us some feedback here, we can just say I just read %d, which is the number that I have just read here, and we use x to fill in that particular placeholder. So what this program is going to do is to keep asking me to enter integers. If I enter an integer, it will get out of the loop without printing, give me a number, which is kind of like an error message, and it will just print the number that I enter, and then go back and ask for another number. That's the infinite loop. And the question is, what if I type ASDF? Okay, is it going to print give me a number like indefinitely, or is it going to skip what I have just entered and move on to the next one? So we'll exit this code, g++-g-o scanf.cpp, and I probably should turn on all the warnings and error messages. Warn all -pedantic, and run scanf. So if I just type in a normal number, let's say 45, it prints I just read 45, which is great. Okay, negative numbers should work as well. So now I type something like this, and it is an infinite loop. Okay, very good. So thank you for pointing this out to me. So here's the question: how are we going to proceed with scanf not being able to read what it is expecting to read? In other words, if I present ASDF to scanf, it will look at the first letter, which is A, and say, that's not the first letter, that's not the first character of any integer number. And the next time I do the scanf, it would try to do the same thing again. It would just read the same letter, which is A, and identify this cannot possibly be the beginning of a number, and that's why it got into an infinite loop. So what am I supposed to do in this case? How do I move forward without using anything other than scanf? Yep.
Just put an exclamation point. Would that work?
Exclamation point?
Yeah, do the opposite. Negation.
And the negation on where?
Can you open the...
In the format string?
Yeah, can you open it again, please? Actually, take it away.
Take
You
what
already
away?
have it there.
If I take this away, then it will come back even if it has not read. It will be stuck in the loop as long as I give it a number. So it's still not going to skip anything that is a non-number. Yep.
Maybe we can add another scanf below the while loop after printf, so it would ask for the.
But what are you going to scan for? That is the question.
For the x.
For %d? For
the whatever stores in the x value. So basically, if it's not a, it just kind of overwrites the whatever we just typed in with the number we gave later on.
But it's not moving forward because it's not seeing what it is supposed to. Go ahead.
You have to ask like scanf and then have another scanf for scanf, because I tried the other one.
Okay, let's go ahead and do this part. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll look up the manual page of scanf. Okay, because the focus is scanf. What can it scan? And if you open up this man page, I can make the window a little bit larger so we don't have to scroll all day long to get to something. Okay, so if you keep reading this part here, at some point it will say conversion specification, which starts with a % symbol. Okay, so %d is basically a conversion specification. It is converting what you type from standard in to a particular thing according to a standard. And if you keep reading this part here, the conversions have, okay, this part here, the following conversion specifiers are available. So we can read %d is this one here. It matches an optionally signed, which means it can be negative, decimal number, which is base 10. The next pointer must be a pointer to an integer. Okay, so I think we looked at this part before in the previous class. Okay, because when we talked about scanf %d, this is where I kind of directed you guys to. But if you keep reading this part here, it has some other stuff here. So it has LD, which is a long base 10 number. We have dash I matches an optionally signed integer. The next pointer must be a pointer to an integer. The integer is read in base 16 if it begins with 0x as a prefix. In base 8 if it starts with a 0. That's not what we want, because if we type ASDF, it is something that is not a number. O is an octal number, base 8. U is unsigned decimal number. It can only go from 0 to 9. X, lowercase x, is a hexadecimal number. And uppercase x is the same. F is a floating point number, and so on. So now we start to go to something that's more interesting. We have the concept of a string. A string is basically a sequence of non-white space characters. So the next pointer must be a pointer to a character array that is long enough to hold the input sequence da 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 da. Have we talked about arrays or strings?
No.
No, so we cannot use this one. Moving forward. See, I don't want you guys to use anything that we have not talked about. Yep.
Sorry, I came in late. What's the question you're answering?
Okay, the question is, in scanf, if you type ASDF when you have %d as the format string, then it's not going to move forward because it will be stuck. Because when scanf reads your input, it will read the character A, but the character A cannot be the beginning of any base 10 number. And the next time you try it, it will do the same thing because it has never moved past the lowercase a character. Okay? Yep.
Why don't you just pull a statement out of the while loop, make an if statement, and then...
It's not going to fix it because scanf %d cannot move past the lowercase a character. So there's no way you can read any additional numbers. Okay, you can experiment it on your own when you're after the class, but the bottom line is scanf using %d as part of the format string cannot move forward as long as you don't proceed with you're not clearing anything. When you're using scanf %d and you encounter any character that cannot be the beginning of an integer, it does not move forward. It keeps hitting the same wall over and over again. It doesn't matter where you put the scanf, in a loop, inside a conditional statement, out of a conditional statement, whether you compare it to 1 or 0, it doesn't matter because it cannot move forward. It will keep returning 0 and report, I cannot read anything, I cannot read anything. Because every time it tries to read, it's reading the same character in the input file. Okay, it's kind of like this, okay? Remember, standard in is kind of like a conveyor belt, right? So let's say the conveyor belt can have items of different colors, okay? So the different colors representing different types of input, numbers, strings, and whatnot, okay? So scanf, has a filter, okay? And basically it says you can specify, okay, remove the red thing from the conveyor belt, okay? That's what you're told to do. You remove the red thing at the front of the conveyor belt. That's your instruction. And guess what you're seeing on the conveyor belt? A blue thing. What are you going to do?
Let it
That's
pass.
not red, I can't remove it, right?
Exactly. If it's not red, you're not removing it. And then you go back to whoever asked you to remove the red thing and say, there's no red thing, I see a blue thing, right? But you're not allowed to touch the blue thing because you are specifically asked to remove the red thing from the front of the conveyor belt. So the next thing that person asks you to remove the red thing, what are you going to do? Absolutely nothing. Do exactly the same thing. It's a blue thing ahead of me. It's not red. I cannot remove a single thing. And then you say, I didn't remove a single thing from the conveyor belt, which is returning 0 from scanf. Do you see what the problem is? So now the question is, So we got this blue thing, the brown thing, and the purple thing in front of the next red thing, which is what I want. So how do we move items out of the conveyor belt that I don't need and get to the one thing that I do need? That is the question. Is that okay? All right. So if you keep reading this part, there's this one here that says, matches a sequence of characters whose length is specified by the maximum field width defaulting to 1. The next pointer must be a pointer to a char, which is a character pointer, and there must be enough room for all the characters. No terminating node byte is added. This usually skip of leading white space is suppressed. To skip white space first, use an explicit space in the format. Blah, 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 and so on. This is our ticket out of our problem. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to the program. Oops.
So it's going to be %C instead of %D.
Well, but you have to use it carefully. Okay, so what this means is, if I use a block statement here, can someone tell me how I can get to this cursor point here? Let me turn on line numbers so we can clearly indicate which line I'm talking about. I'm talking about line 11. If I ever get to line 11, what does it mean? Well, the most immediate reason we know is because scanf returns a 0. Okay, it has to be because of that. And scanf returns a 0 because of what? Because it is not reading a single thing that it was expected to read, right? So in this case, because we're seeing %d as the format string, what was it supposed to read? A decimal integer, signed, right? So it wasn't reading that. It's reading something other than the beginning of an integer. Okay, very good. So it can be A, can be lowercase a, can be uppercase Z, can be exclamation point, can be double quote, can be anything other than the possible beginning of a signed integer. Is that making any sense so far? So at this point, I know I got some junk on the conveyor belt that I need to clear. Okay, and the only way I know how to clear something without using anything other than scanf is to say, oh, give me a character. Any character, just give me one. So that means at this point, I can do a scanf here and say, give me just a character. But you cannot just ask it to give you a character, because then it will, scanf also always want to store whatever it's reading to a location. So now the question is, where am I going to store this?
Maybe we can make it to a null, or store it for some different variable.
What about this? What would that do? Well, first of all, is this going to work? Okay, is it going to clear that one item that is obscuring scanf from the next integer? That's the first question. The second question is, what are we actually putting into X? That's the second question. Go ahead.
Something other than integers onto X.
Well, it's going to read. Okay, how are? Go ahead. Let me answer that question first.
I think it would be a 1.
No, we're not putting a 1 into X. It will return 1. Scanf returns 1, but that's not what it is going to store into variable X.
So it's going to read a character, but if you've initialized X as an integer and
Yeah.
you read a character, isn't that some kind of violation? You can't put a character in an integer variable, can you?
Well, what exactly is a character?
A
Do-
non-integer, right?
Ah, there is the question. Okay, so this is a very good discussion. What is a character?
It's a sequence of 1s and 0s.
It's a sequence of zeros and ones. Okay, very good. But how many zeros and ones are we talking about? How many bits are we talking about when we talk about a character? 8. Okay, it's a 1 byte. Okay, so do we have such a concept called an 8-bit integer? Do we have the concept of an 8-bit integer?
Yes.
Yeah, we do. And guess what? A signed 8-bit integer is a char. They are basically the same thing. Okay? Okay, so are there any questions about this part? An unsigned a signed 8-bit integer is basically a character. Okay, they're equivalent. So the next question is, but hold on a second here. X is not an 8-bit character. It is not an 8-bit integer. It is a 32-bit integer. So can I store an 8-bit thing into a 32-bit or a place that is reserved to store 32 bits? And I don't really care about the value because this is just junk. I just need a place to put the junk. Yeah, we can do that. Okay? Because what we are storing has a smaller width than the amount of space that is already allocated. So it's going to be okay, even though it's not the best thing to do. The best way to do this is to allocate something like this. Okay? Now in C++ you can do this. In C and C++ both you can do this. Okay? So what we can do is now we can say int 8_t, and now we have to include stdint.h, and then we say junk, and now we store into junk. Is that making any sense? So I'm not even using x, even though I could have used x. I'm just making this more clear. So now what I'm doing is I'm declaring a new variable called junk, and the type of junk is an 8-bit character. Is an 8-bit integer, which is the same thing as a character. So I'm asking scanf, instead of asking scanf to read a number, a base 10 signed number, I'm now asking it just to give me the next character. Is that okay? So if I enter ASDF on the keyboard, what this will do on line 13 is going to read the letter A and put the ASCII code of letter A, lowercase a, into junk. And lowercase a is 97 in terms of ASCII code. So 97, quote unquote, is the value of junk after line 13 in this case. And what about the other characters, ASDF? What about SDF? Well, it will do it one at a time. Okay, so every time I read a junk character in, it will give me a number, which is not exactly what I wanted to do because it would just it would be complaining too much. But eventually, it would have cleared all the junk and ready to read the next number. Yep.
So if you entered, or if the user entered ABC5, it would read A, store into junk, then it would loop into B, from B into junk until it got to 5. Is that correct?
Well, there's the question is, by the time it gets to the 5, does it understand the 5 is not a junk, but instead it is a number? So that's the question, because it will keep, okay, this on line 13, it will keep trying to read the character, and everything is a character, so this can never fail unless we're at the end of a file. Is that making any sense? So when do you stop and say, oh, you know what, I want to read a number now, not just the next character? Are you guys seeing what I'm trying to say here? Sort of?
Now, can the if statement fix it?
An if statement on which line?
Between 13 and 14, like if we expand.
But it is always successful.
Oh, okay.
If it is a digit that you have read, then it would have successfully read a digit. So you have just taken a byte out of the next integer unintentionally. So by the time you actually try to process the integer, it's now become just a part of the original integer. Okay, let me just write it more clearly. Okay, so let's say I'm gonna use a mouse pad here to demonstrate the actual input. Okay, so let's say the input is A, S, D, F, 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm just using the spacing to make it more clear. Okay, so when we read the letter A, when scanf is processing the letter A, it's expecting an integer. Does it match the beginning of an integer? No. So scanf returns a 0, saying that I did not find what I'm looking for. I did not process anything on the conveyor belt. Is that making any sense? Yep.
You didn't process A into junk code?
Not yet. Not yet. So what we want to do is to trace this code, and then we'll run it through the debugger to make sure this is exactly what it's doing. Okay. So when it processes line A, when it reads A as the input, scanf returns a 0. When scanf returns a 0, not scanf becomes true, so that means we get into the loop. Is that making any sense? So when it gets into the loop, we have our local variable junk declared, and it says, okay, just give me a character. Is lowercase a just a character? Yeah, anything is a character, including digits too. So lowercase a is now read by scanf, and we put it into junk. Okay? And then the program will print, give me a number, exclamation point, line feed. After that, what do we do? Where did we go back to?
To the while.
We go back to line 10, exactly. So that means, the conveyor belt has this item already removed from the conveyor belt. The next item is lowercase s. Is that making any sense? Okay. So, but is that the beginning of an integer?
No.
No. So the same thing happens, right? Scanf returns a 0, and then not 0 is true, and it goes into this loop here, and it reads lowercase s into junk, and then it prints give me a number, and then we move on to lowercase d. We'll do the same thing, right? Lowercase d is not the beginning of a number. Scanf on line 10 returns a 0, not 0 is true. We go back in here, we go to line 13. Line 13 is going to read the ASCII code of d, put it into junk, and then it prints give me a number. We go back to line 10 again. This time we are processing f, which is the same thing. Lowercase f is not the beginning of a base 10 number. It will return a 0 on line 10. Okay, the scanf is going to return a 0. Not 0 is true, which means we go to line 13 again. It will read lowercase f, the ASCII code, into junk. It will print give me a number, and then this time we move on to the digit 1. But that's when we get back to line 10. Is 1 the beginning of an integer? Yeah, that's one of the possible beginnings of an integer. So scanf %d is going to be successful this time. So scanf %d is going to say, oh, okay, I just found a valid beginning of an integer, and I found another integer, I found another component that is a part of an integer, and I found another one. So it will process 1, 2, 3 as a base 10 integer, and put that value into x in this case, and then it will return a 1. If scanf returns a 1, not 1 is 0, and it will get out of the loop, and then it would print, I just read 1, 2, 3. Go ahead.
Why would it not read 1, 2, 3?
Why would it not read 1, 2, 3?
You're saying that it'll read A, then S, then D, then F,
Yeah.
then 1.
Yeah.
Why will it not read 123?
It will read 123, but I'm just explaining inside scanf. It will first read the first letter to determine that, yes, this is the beginning of an integer. Then it will keep reading until it encounters something that is not a part of an integer, like a line feed character or a space or something like that.
So if there was 12A, would that be a valid entry for the user?
Well, if you have something like this, then it will read 1, 2, and 3 and interpret it as 123. But by the time it encounters the question mark, it will identify the question mark is not a part of an integer, and it will stop right there. So the question mark will be left on the conveyor belt after the scanf on line 10. But then it will be the next time when I try to read the next integer that the question mark is going to be processed. Is that okay? So what we want to do now is to test this code and see if that is actually doing what I just said that it would do. Okay? This is something that you should also do, is to write your code, do some experiments, okay? Something simple like this, okay? And then see if it does what the program is supposed to do. Figure it out in your head first what it is supposed to do, run it and double check and see if it's actually doing what you think it should be doing. Yes?
Just to clarify for myself, the exclamation scanf means not 0?
It means not whatever the expression is. Scanf returns an integer.
Okay.
So it's the same thing as saying scanf returns a 0.
So while scanf returns a 0, we go in the loop, or?
Yes, it is true. While scanf returns 0. Basically, that's what it's saying.
Okay, so any number is not 0, so it just passes the loop.
Okay, scanf does two things. It will attempt to read something in standard in as an integer and store that to x in this case.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it returns a number which indicates the number of things that it has read. Not the value of the things that it has just read, but the number of things that it has just read. So in this case, it can be 0, which means I didn't see an integer, or 1, I just read an integer into x.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right, so let's go ahead and test this program and see if it does what it's supposed to. And when I compile this program, it will probably complain about it because I never did anything with junk. And it did not. It's because of the function call. It thought that I did something with it, but I actually did not. Okay, so let's gdb scanf, run the program, and it's asking me to enter something, and I will input exactly what I typed in the text editor, ASDF123 question mark. And I forgot to set some breakpoints, sorry. This is, Well, we'll run it without setting breakpoints first, and then see whether it will print exactly 4 error messages, process 1, 2, 3, print 1, 2, 3, and then give me 1 additional error message, because that's what it's supposed to do. Is that okay? Is it doing what I said it would do?
Yes.
Okay. So this time, now this is an infinite loop. There's no way for me to get out of this one. So I have to type Control-C to terminate the execution of the program, because there really is no way to stop this program now. So I'm going to just do a Control-C, stop the execution of the program. And let's go ahead and re-debug the entire program, but this time we set up breakpoints. So we want to set up a breakpoint on line 10, B10. Put a breakpoint on line 13. That would be good, because we want to delete the second breakpoint and put it on line 14 instead. That would be good. Okay, so we have one breakpoint on line 10, which is the while statement before the scanf. We have another breakpoint on line 14, which is after it has failed to try to read an integer and read a single character instead, because we want to see what it has just read into junk. That's what we want to see. And so we can certainly put one on line 16, but that's kind of not necessary because we have a printf that prints out exactly what we have just read already. So we'll go ahead and do it this way, and then we'll run the program. Oops, no. Continue. This is where I type in ASDF123 and then the question mark. Press the enter key. We are now on line 14, which is here, because we have just failed to read an integer in, and we are on line 14. It has read a character into junk already. So what do you think junk should be at this point? The type is an 8-bit integer, so what should it be? Go ahead, you mentioned something earlier. Yep, it's the ASCII code of lowercase a. Yep, that's exactly what it is. Well, at least that's what I think it should be. That's what it is. Sorry? So that's how you can process your code. That's how you can process an error condition. And then I can say continue, and we get into the same spot again because the next letter is lowercase as. Yeah, s. And that's why it's also not the beginning of an integer. It got into the loop again. It printed an error message, which is give me a number. It has performed another scanf %c. It has read another character into junk. So this time junk should be lowercase s. Yep.
Is there? Okay, so it looks like junk keeps getting updated with the new character. Is there a way to append it instead of overwriting it? Say you wanted to have a track, you needed to keep track of the error messages.
So you want to keep track of all the letters that you have read?
Right. So like if for some reason if the user entered 3 wrong things, exit the program. So instead of doing like a count, but we keep a running.
You can do that if you want.
ASD.
Uh-huh.
So there is a way to append it instead of just.
No, we haven't talked about arrays yet because that's what you need to keep track of, the characters that we have read that do not meet the requirement of being the beginning of an integer. So since we have not talked about that yet, and to me in this case it's not important because I just want to skip all the non-integer stuff so that I can actually get to the integer that I can read. Okay. Any other questions about this part? No questions? Okay, let me just ask this again. Does everybody understand the differences between a %d versus a %c in Scanf? Okay, are we sure? So let's.
%d will catch integers.
And
%c
decimal
will catch
numbers.
everything. That's the way to look at it. Characters.
Let me give you 2 programs. So the first one is scanf. I'll just call it scanfd for %d. So this one is really simple. Okay, all it does is to do a scanf %d, store into x, %x. But let me keep it like this and see if it complains about it, because there's a definite problem here, and I want to see if the compiler can catch it. And we'll go ahead and initialize x to a particular funny value. So let's just reinitialize it to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if we did not read something, there's a way to tell as well. So return 0. That's my entire program. What is the error of this program? For sure, there's a problem here.
We're missing the address for x.
Yep, scanf is supposed to have the address of x, not the value of x. The way it is right now is we are giving the value of x to scanf. Scanf doesn't care about the value of x. It only wants to know where x is so it can store the integer into x. So, but we want to see whether the compiler can catch this or not. So we'll say g++ -1 all pedantic -g scanfd scanfd.cpp -o. There we go. Yep. It says right here, %d expects an argument of type. What is that? Have we talked about this as a type? It's a pointer to an integer. Okay, and what we specify as an argument to scanf is x. What is the type of x? It's just an integer. So they don't match. Okay, the argument is expecting a pointer to an integer, but all we're supplying is just an integer. So it does give me a warning, which is really kind of troubling to me because this should have been an error, but it's only giving me a warning. So what I will do is I'm going to fix this problem and say, oh, okay, now it is an address. Okay. Now there's no problem. I run the program just by itself. I don't need GDB in this case. What happens? Do you think I type 6 and then press the enter?
It will replace the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, let's look at the program again. I'm going to stop the program and we'll look at the source code because I think we're missing something here. The program has initialization here that says x starts with a value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we attempt to read whatever is in standard in to x as a signed 32-bit integer. Is that okay? And then after that I print, oh, what is the value? What did I just read from standard in? And then we exit the program. Okay, that's the source code. So when we run the program, and I type 6 and then press the enter key, what should be the output in this case? I just read 6, right? Because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 was the value of x before scanf, and this time scanf does successfully read it successfully read a signed base 10 integer. So the value of 6 should have overwritten 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's why it should print I just read 6. That's exactly what it is. Okay, nothing surprising. This is what we already know about printf, is how to read an integer. Let's copy this to scanfc. Okay, so this time we use %c instead of %d. And we'll initialize x to 0 in this case. And we change this d to a c. That's all we're doing. Okay. And then we'll recompile the program. G++ -1 all -pedantic -o -g -o scanfc.cpp, and it complains about it. The reason why it's complaining is because %c specifies an argument of a char pointer, but the argument has a integer pointer. Is that okay so far? Does everybody understand why it's complaining? Because I'm asking, scanf is being asked to remove a small item, but what I'm giving it is the address of a bigger item, but they are not the same type, so it's complaining about it. Okay, well, we know how to fix this one, don't we? We just have to say that x is now a signed 8-bit integer, or char. I mean, that's basically the same thing as a char, but I'm going to use this one just so that I can emphasize a char is nothing more than an integer. Okay, it's just the width is only 8-bit and it is signed. Are we still doing okay so far with this program? Do you think it should complain this time? Should not complain. Okay. Okay, no complaints. That's great. And then when we run this program and I enter 6 and then press the enter key, what do you think it will print out this time? This is a trick question. If it prints 6, I just read 6, I would not have the second program, right? So we know that it's not going to print I just read 6, but what is it going to print? Okay, tell me again, what is %c? %c means character, right? Give me a character. When you read a character from standard in, what are you actually reading, or what are you storing? The ASCII code corresponding to that character. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because everything boils down to ASCII code when you're talking about a text file. So now I type 6 on the keyboard and then press the enter key. Which character am I reading in this case? 6 is the character. Well, 6 being the character, what is the ASCII code of 6? Okay, first of all, are they supposed to be the same? Is the ASCII code of 6 the same as the value 6? They do not have to be the same. They can be. I mean, you might have a encoding scheme where they are exactly the same, but in ASCII they are not. They're not guaranteed to be the same. Okay, what are we talking about here? I still have no idea. I'm in the fog. If you use man ASCII on any type of Linux system, it will give you the ASCII table. In the ASCII table, the fourth column is the character. Okay, which character are we talking about? And then you can look at the ASCII code in base 10, which is octo, in base 8, which is octo, base 10, which is decimal, or base 16, which is hexadecimal. So you look up 6 as a digit. Okay, that's the digit, that's the character 6. What is the ASCII code of 6? Is 36 in hexadecimal or 554 in decimal? So how is it going to be printed? Is it going to print 54 or is it going to print 36? We know it's one or the other. So the question now is in printf, what does %d specify? D stands for decimal. So which one should be printed? 54. Okay. So now we go back to the program, which is already in execution. We specify 6. We press the enter key, and it says I just read 54. But it's not the integer 54 they had just read. It read a character that has an ASCII code of 54 in decimal. That's the meaning of this program. Are we okay with this particular program? Can everybody distinguish scanf with a %d as the format as opposed to %c as the format? All right, very good. So now you go back to the original scanf program, and let me just ask you, would this help with your homework assignment?
Yes.
Thank you.
Very
You're
much.
welcome. But one thing you don't want to do is to unconditionally print it, give me a number here, because if you enter like a whole bunch of junk characters, it will give you one error message per character, per junk character, and that's probably not the best thing to do. Is to spam the end user with endless, not endless, but multiple error messages for one actual error message. So let's push this program one step further. If I enter something other than a number, and I do want to give the end user an error message, but I only want to print it once, how am I going to do this?
Do it outside of the loop.
Do what outside of the loop?
Printf.
Give me a number, the error message itself. Okay, let me turn on the line numbers. I'll let you guys have this for a while. Okay, how do I make this program so it prints, give me a number only once. If I enter ASDF, it prints that once. It will get rid of all the junk characters, and then we'll process the next integer correctly. There are probably multiple ways to do this, but only using scanf, how am I going to do this? And as a clue, you are allowed to use another variable. We can declare another variable and use it. That's a pretty useful clue. Because you have to remember something.
Even though if it's like AB5, you still want error message.
Okay, so if I enter AB5 and then press the enter key, I want to print, give me a number just once, and then process 5 correctly, print I just read 5, and then go back and ask me for a number again. Instead of printing give me a number twice, which is what this program is going to do as it is now. Let me give you a clue.
Make another loop inside of that loop.
Sorry?
Make another loop inside of that loop.
So you want to make another loop with only scanf %c until it's not reading a character anymore?
Like a do loop.
Well, you have to specify how to get out of the new loop. That is the problem.
With an if statement.
No, you get out of a loop using the condition of the loop, right?
Well, you have the extra variable which determines the condition. You have the if
But
statement.
who's going to set that condition?
The if statement.
And where's the if statement?
Inside of the
Then you have a chicken and egg problem. Nope, we don't need another loop.
On line 10, if you set the not scanf equal to a variable, to
Okay. I'm not 100% understanding the structure of your code.
So line 10, you do.
Okay, let's declare the next the new variable first. How do we call that?
Why?
No. You can decide.
Why not?
Why not why? That's great. That is just great. Okay, how do we use it?
Alright, so now in line 11, you're going to make that whole thing, the not scanf equals y.
Like that?
Double.
So you want to store the value of not scanf into y?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
That will do it. I mean, yeah, it's gonna complain about it, so we'll fix that first, so that the compiler does not complain about it. Okay. Okay. Moving on.
and you're going to remove the give me a number, that error message from that loop, and you're going to.
Okay, we'll comment it out.
So now you're going to have a conditional statement after the while loop involving y. So
If it is not gonna work, because when you're on line 17, what do you know for sure? The one thing that you know for sure is the y has to be a 0.
yeah.
But you cannot tell whether we have already encountered errors or not. Do you see my point?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good attempt, but it's not going to work in this case. Okay, so let's see what we can do here. I'm going to get rid of y and get rid of this junk here because we don't need that anymore, and revert the program back to the original. Okay.
You almost had it. You just need to have this if statement inside of that.
The if statement inside where?
The most inside loop.
It's inside. Okay, hold on. Okay, let me just restore everything here. Okay, so tell me what to do.
No, not there. Delete that if statement. Delete all the way to 17, and then the 15, the 2 dashes. Delete that as well, and then start the if statement here. Yes.
That's not gonna work too. It's not gonna work because by the time I get to line 15, what is guaranteed to be in y? What has to be in y? No. Because y is getting, as long as y is not equal to 0, we stay in the loop, right? And where is line 15? Is it in the loop or outside of the loop? It's in the loop, so by the time we get to line 15, we are guaranteed what? Y is non-zero. It's guaranteed to be non-zero, right? So this is not going to help because if you say if y does not equal to 0, print, give me a number, then this is the same thing as the original code. Okay, the new variable is not making a difference. Do you guys see? Do you guys see why the second solution is not going to work either? The first solution is the same way because the fact that we are out of the loop means y has to be a 0. So we cannot distinguish whether did we get the number right the first time or did we actually get a non-digit character before. Okay, and it will only print it after we actually got a number, which is too late. Because I want to print the error message after we get something that is not a number, so that I can remind the end user, hey, you're supposed to put in a number, not just any sequence of characters. Okay. Yep.
So why don't you on the 14 put after the scanf, after the whole statement, why don't you set that
Here, which line 14? Yeah.
Number 14 before the semicolon at the end. Put double equal to. Actually, question mark over there, and then double equal to. Right?
Question mark here.
No. It's double equal to and then 0. Then make extra parentheses around the whole thing. No. Well, yeah, I guess. And then the other question mark. Then if that's true, then you put the extra the y equal to 1. You have to have that in parentheses.
Well, that's basically a conditional statement,
Yeah,
and you need to specify what else, right?
And
Else, what are we going to do?
And else you have that's where I need the help.
Okay, how about this? I give you the solution.
Sure.
Okay, so I don't know how many times I have to undo it to get back to the original program. We're almost there. Did I get? Nope. There we go. Almost there. Get rid of y. There we go. Okay, so here we get back to the original state of the program. All right. So the problem is, okay, what is the problem? Remind me again. What is the problem? I enter ASDF123 question mark. It prints 4 error messages, and then it processes 1, 2, 3 correctly. So what is the problem?
Too many errors.
It prints too many errors. Okay, very good. So what we want to do is to gate the error message and say, sometimes don't print it. Okay, I got it. Don't keep nagging me. Okay, stop that. Okay, so that sounds like a reasonable beginning point, right? We're basically saying, yes, sometimes we enter something that is not a number, but don't keep complaining about each and every single character of something that I mistyped, okay? Just give me one message, I get it. Okay, so now the question is, what do we put here as my condition? How can I tell this is not the first time you give me the error message? I got it, shut up, don't print anymore. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to do something like this. This is not an unreasonable way to write a program, okay? If the first time, give me an error message. But if it's not the first time, shut up, okay? Just don't print, repeated messages. Is that okay so far? Okay. So now the question is, how do we know whether this is the first time we get into this loop or not? What can we use to identify whether this is the first time or not? There are. Say again? Aha! You're saying that we need a counter, right?
Yeah.
How many times have we gone through this loop? Very good. So we'll say, counter. We'll call it a nag counter. Did I misspell it right?
Yep.
Nag is N-A-G, right? Okay, so here's nag counter. Okay, very good. So in here, we already know what it's supposed to be, because if it is the first time, what should be the value of the nag counter?
1.
If nag counter is 1 or 0, because we count from 0 for the most part. Now, if I'm comparing against 0, it is the same thing as saying not nag counter. Okay, I just want to point out that is really the same thing. Okay, so that also means since it is a counter, I need to increment it, right? So where do I increment nag counter? After the conditional statement, okay? So we say, increment nag counter. So every single time I go through this loop, I increment nag counter by 1. Very good. And if I try to compile the program right now, it will give me a warning. What kind of warning should I be getting this time? There's a problem, okay? But the compiler is smart about it and say, Tack, I think you forgot something. So let's not guess this one, because since the compiler is going to warn me about it, I can just let the compiler.
So that it has not been initialized?
Correct. But I want to see what the compiler is how it's going to complain about it or not. It's not complaining about it. I'm bugged. I am bugged. Is this the right program? It is the right program. There's no initialization, and I refer to it, and it does not complain about it. That is not good. Maybe I have to turn on optimization, because it doesn't do some of the analysis. Now it complains about it. Okay, the dash O2 is not oxygen. It is big O is optimization, and 2 means level 2 of optimization. I think level 1 may do it too. But without the optimization, it doesn't try to do what we call flow analysis. Okay, the same variable, how is it being used in the whole program? And when it does not do the flow analysis, it doesn't understand, hey, this variable is being read without being initialized. And that's why originally it did not complain about it. But now that I turn on flow analysis, which is a part of optimization, it analyzes the flow of the data, which means, oh, how are you using nag counter? Where are you initializing it? And where do you read it? Oh, hold on a second here. You didn't even bother to initialize it. And that's why it generated this error message. Okay, so hint to you guys, turn this on in code blocks. Okay, make this also a default setting, so it will give you warning messages like this. Yep.
Pull the source code again, please.
Absolutely, since we have to fix it, right?
Is it? Can you show the line numbers?
Huh?
Line
Oh,
numbers?
sure. You know what? I'm gonna do this. This is called the startup script of VI. So vimrc is called the startup file of VI. So if I set NU at this point, then every time I start up VI, it will automatically include line numbers. Well, just a little feature that you might find useful. Go ahead.
The line 7 initializes.
It does not. Line 7 is the declaration of the local variable, which simply means, oh, we have a local variable called nag counter. But it does not initialize. It does not put a value into it. In cisp360 terminology, we are allocating a column and call it x, or nag counter in this case. But what is in that column, we don't know. We are not specifying the value of that column. Yep.
So it's gonna compare with a bunch of gibberish that is.
Yep. That's
there.
going to be a gibberish. So sometimes it will print something, and sometimes it won't.
That's where you give the error.
That's why the compiler. That's what the compiler is complaining about.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So if you had started off putting in nag counter equals 0
Where do you want to put it?
at line 7.
Okay, that is not going to fix the problem. Now, if I do this and I type, okay, so let's say we do it this way. Okay, now let's run this through our head and see what's going to happen. If I specify ASDF 123 question mark, and then 1 2, press the enter key. Okay, so let me write it out. Okay, I'm good. I'll even write it out here so that we can see the source code and the input at the same time. ASDF 123 question mark 12, and then the enter key. So I just use a CR to represent the carriage return. Okay, so in this case, what will the program do? The first letter or the first character that it encounters is lowercase a. Okay, so when it encounters lowercase a, cannot be the beginning of a base 10 number. On line 12, it's going to fail the scanf. Scanf returns a 0 without removing the lowercase a letter, and then it will move. Oops, it will move on into the loop. Scanf %c will clear that lowercase a letter, put it into junk. Is that okay? I'm just tossing it, right? I don't really care what I just read. I just know that it's not the beginning of an integer. And then at that point, what is the value of nag counter? 0, because I initialize 0 all the way before the for loop. Okay, so it will print not 0 is true, right? And it will print give me a number. Great, that's what it's supposed to do. Increment counter by 1 becomes 1. It goes back to line 12. Now it will try to read the lowercase s as the beginning of a base 10 number. Is it? No. So scanf will fail again, return a 0. Not 0 is true. We go into line 15 again. So we will read the next character into junk, which is lowercase f in this case, lowercase s. It will read it into junk. And then at this point, what is nag counter? It's already 1, which is great, right? Not 1 is 0, and it won't print me another error message. So it will basically not print anything anymore from here on. So when it gets to the question mark, it's not gonna warn me. It's not gonna give me an error message because at that time, net counter is already 4, and 4 is not a 0, so it won't give me any error message. So we got the initialization concept right, but it's at the wrong place. Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying you can initialize it back to 0 after you say print.
Okay, so you are saying doing
Yeah.
this? Then it will print every single time.
No. After the print, I just read blah blah.
You mean here?
Yeah.
Okay, that will solve the problem, but I have a better solution. I always do, don't I?
Of course.
Yeah.
Especially on the 10.
Okay, how about we do this before we get into the loop? Would that work?
No.
Well, it is the same thing, but I only have one line of initialization instead of 2.
Yeah. Roll sheet.
Yeah, it's okay. I already dropped the people who should be dropped. Yep.
Would it be okay to initialize and declare nag counter at line 12, making it local instead of global?
Yes. Well, it is still local, okay? It's still local even when it's on line 8. It's not in the scope, it's a scope issue. Yes, you can do it this way as well. Yep.
Would that make it work the way you want it to?
That will do it. That will do exactly what we want. Let me see. So before we enter the loop, we do this. Yep, that will do it. Yep.
Can you say one more time why we can't just initialize it at the beginning?
If you initialize it before the for loop, then it will only print the error message once. Because the second time it encounters anything that cannot be the beginning of a base 10 number, nag counter is already non-zero, so it won't print messages ever again. Okay, so we have kind of worked on this a lot. So let's check it. Let's see if it works the way it's supposed to. So G++ compiles just fine, and then we run the program. So we'll use exactly the pattern that I specified. Okay, ASDF 123 question mark 12, and then press the enter key. It should do what? What is the expected behavior in this case?
One error. 123.
It prints. I just read 123,
One error.
and then another error,
And 12.
and then 12, and then it will prompt me again. Okay. That's exactly what it does. So is that going to help with your homework assignment?
Yes. A lot.
Maybe. But do you guys understand the solution? The little scanf %c is basically the way to clear the junk. Okay, and it will keep doing this until the attempt to read a base 10 number is successful. That's basically what this is.
Pull up source code again, please.
Sure, absolutely. To get out of this, Control C, and then we get back to the source code. Yep.
Oh, so it's now initialized within the for loop, the nag counter.
Yes. It has to be initialized every time we attempt to read a base 10 number.
What was the reason you moved it from the main into the for loop?
Oh, I just moved the declaration into the for loop, which is actually a proper thing to do because the use of nag counter is only up to here, which is within this particular scope. So it makes sense to make this local variable within that scope instead of to a outer scope, because no code outside of this local scope cares about the nag counter, so we don't really need to maintain it outside.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? I think that's pretty much a copy and paste thing that you can use. Which also makes it a very good question to ask in the next exam. I give you something like this, and I give you the sample input, and you tell me what the output is supposed to be. That would be a good question. Yep.
When can we see our scores for previous homework assignments?
After they're graded.
Like, I don't know if I'm doing it right or, you know.
Well, I gave you the solution in class.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
for every homework assignment, I always give you the solution on the due date. So at least you know that part, and you can test your program too to see whether it works the same way. I will try to get to it, but the grading the exam comes first. I have to get that one out of the way first.
About homework. Well, when it asks enter the number of entries, do we have to imply this logic check, or we just skip it and use it only for the
for the
entries
actual
themselves?
entries. Yeah, you only need the error checking for the entries themselves.
Okay, so the other stuff can be okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you can do the other one without assumption that it might be erroneous.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions?
I was banging my
Questions?
head on this for 3 days.
Well, but since you did, okay, when I presented the solution, it just kind of sinks in,
Oh yes,
right?
definitely.
It's kind of like, consider those 3 days as cultivating the soil. Now I give you the seed. It's like, boop, okay, now we're done.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? So what else can we do with Scanf?
Characters.
Sorry?
Characters and integers.
It can read just about anything. Yep. And depending on how you specify the format string, you can ask it to read different things in different ways too. You can have it to read an integer, and you can specify, it will include leading zeros, or it has to be a certain width. There are a lot of things you can do with scanf. But in this homework assignment, we just need %d and, in this case, %c for error checking. Okay. Any other questions? Yep.
For the prompt,
Mm-hmm.
I think you said the format has to be max. Like, can we just make it anything we want, or it has to be exactly what we want?
I think keep it the way the homework specifies is best. Because if I use a script to grade it, then I'm just comparing the output of your program to what I expect. So it would be much easier if everybody turns in a program that behaves the same
So
way.
when you say it's in the prompt to be exactly the quotation has to be exactly that, right?
You can probably add a space after that, So having trailing spaces would be fine, but it starts with the specified string content. All right. Any questions? No other questions? All right. I'll see you guys on Wednesday.